Does anyone else feel like we're living in clown world, like a real-life Black Mirror episode? Truth seems meaningless, words have been hollowed out, and people appear to have lost their grip on reality. Critical thinking has been abandoned in favour of groupthink, with opinions shaped not by facts, knowledge, or objectivity, but by the need to project a curated identity and cling to tribal conformity. Increasingly, people seem fragile, allergic to accountability, and more concerned with seeking validation for delusional attitudes and behaviour than with honest introspection. The left-right divide now overshadows common sense, leaving no room for genuine dialogue, thoughtful reflection, or real social and moral progress. I've been branded an artsy and cancelled by the far left for things like criticising BLM, stating that sex is an immutable biological reality, for recognising that mass, uncontrolled, illegal immigration is a disaster, and for refusing to self-flagellate over being born white. And at the same time, I've been labelled woke, an SJW, a snowflake, etc. by the far right because I'm in favour of a more equitable society, because I abhor the concept of working a 40-hour week just to earn enough to barely survive in order to work another 40 more, and because I'm vegan, that is, someone with the supposedly radical belief that non-human animals are not commodities and that their lives and rights are worth more than a sandwich, pair of shoes, or bet on the races. The truth is, the entire political system is fundamentally flawed and designed to distract and pit the hoi polloi against each other whilst the elite plot and profit. So I have no political allegiance, I'm neither left nor right wing, and try to form nuanced opinions based on every relevant factor. I find that those on both ends of the political spectrum are often equally intolerant, hypocritical, dishonest, and easily offended, but over the last maybe 10 years, it's those on the far left that I've observed to be the most obnoxious and odious overall, though this could just be because they tend to be more vocal and I've encountered more of them. In my experience, the far left can be characterised by a very specific type of person, one who makes a mockery of the causes they represent, and one who is so overtly narcissistic and unaware of their own blatant hypocrisies that you question if they're satirical or just straight up insane. A perfect archetype of the far left is a person I know or used to know called Fiona. Fiona is a biological male but identifies as a trans woman, and in the interest of not being inflammatory, I will courteously refer to Fiona as she and her. For context, I met Fiona in around 2021 when we were involved in environmental campaigning, mostly delivering leaflets, fly posting, outreaching, mobilisation, etc. Fiona was always very far left, but like lots of her ilk, the persona she cultivated online was somewhat tempered in person. But although she was less aggressive with her opinions when talking face to face, she didn't half bang on about them. Now, in this age of social media narcissism, where younger generations seem fixated on all things superficial, endless selfies, makeup tutorials, and materialism, those bizarre, badly acted, caught-on-camera skits, vapid celebrity gossip, etc., I wish people would talk more about social justice and issues that actually matter. But the thing is, Fiona's causes were mostly just trivial distractions and non-issues. Things along the lines of clapping is ableist and should be replaced with jazz hands, white people shouldn't have dreadlocks cause cultural appropriation, and the word mother is oppressive and excludes other identities. That level of ridiculous, petty, performative outrage. What struck me wasn't just that her attention was consumed by such non-issues instead of the world's real, glaring, urgent crises, but how clear it was to me that she had no real conviction in a single word she said. Rather than speaking from experience or principle, she was merely parroting leftist jargon and slogans that she'd picked up from whichever mouthpiece or community she aspired to identify with, that matched her aesthetic and the image she wished to project of herself. Her politics felt less like a belief system and more like an accessory. A perfect example of how unabashedly flimsy Fiona's morals are was her claim to be vegan. Veganism is one of the only valid causes that she attached herself to, yet tellingly the one that she would speak about the least. But I always just knew she wasn't really vegan. My intuition rarely fails me on that one, and I can tell when people genuinely care about animal rights versus when it's a token part of their purported intersectional, consistent anti-oppression values, or just a passing identity that they want to try for size after seeing a photo of their favourite influencer with a plant-based burger. And sure enough, after one leafleting session in Norwich, Fiona nipped into a newsagent and came out with a tuna sandwich. Of course I questioned it, given that she claimed to be vegan, and her response was there were no vegan sandwiches. There would have been things like certain sweets, crisps and biscuits that were vegan if she was really that hungry, and she could have gone somewhere else or just waited until getting home. But this summed her up completely. The tiniest inconvenience and mildest obstacle and her principles crumbled. The fact she was willing to pay for exploitation, abuse and murder, rather than tolerate a short delay in getting food, shows just how shallow her conviction is. As I said, Fiona is very prone to parroting the language, phrases and opinions circulating in her echo chamber, like a child who's just learnt a new word and insists on using it at every opportunity. On one occasion, which I still find really funny, we were at the home of another activist, Gabby, and her then partner, Matt. Fiona was holding court with her usual contrived enthusiasm. If I remember right, it was a pseudo-intellectual rant on neo-feudalism. She must have dropped the word feudalism every other sentence, and it was painfully obvious this was her word of the week. When Fiona paused for breath, Gabby casually asked her, "Remind me, what does feudalism mean?" And well, the wind went right out of Fiona's sails and the flash of panic on her face was priceless. For all her bombast, she had no fucking clue. It was like the far left version of conservative author Bethany Mandel's inability to define the word woke, which her entire book was based on.
Would you mind defining woke? Because it's come up a couple times and I just want to make sure we're on the same page.
So, I mean, woke is sort of the idea that this is going to be one of those moments that goes viral.
Drawing a blank, Fiona then turned to Matt and said, "Matt, help me out, what does it mean?" Unbelievable. And interesting that whilst I could have given her the definition of feudalism, she automatically deferred to the man in the room to rescue her. By her own logic, that little slip could stretch to misogyny, mansplaining, patriarchy. Take your pick from the far left buzzword bingo card. I haven't seen Fiona in a few years, but until a couple of days ago have had her on my Facebook, both her personal account and the alarmingly successful page she runs, which centres on all things far left, where you'll find a highly affected curation of posts detailing all the latest things you must be offended by else you're a literal Nazi, with a liberal scattering of in-words and phrases from BIPOC, queer, colonialism, LGBTQI, JK, LMNOP+, to Zir, Zir, Zem, Indigenous, NBs, that's the even cooler way of saying non-binary, and ACEs, which I believe is the edgy abbreviation of asexual, and a load of other far-left slang I couldn't even hazard a guess at. I've been so grossed out by the stuff that she posts on her pages, not just the pretentiousness of it, but the sheer absurdity. She recently posted this, basically saying that she, a biological male, is suffering with PMDD, which for those who don't know is premenstrual dysphoric disorder, a debilitating condition that biological women suffer with during and in the lead up to their period. Symptoms of PMDD include extreme mood swings, depression, anxiety and irritability, bloating, headaches and difficulty concentrating. So for someone who has not one single component of the female reproductive system and ergo does not menstruate, to flat out pretend to have this condition when it's a blatant physical impossibility is so insulting and undermining to those who genuinely suffer with PMDD and other menstrual conditions. The delusion, dishonesty, and lack of self-awareness is staggering. It's that constant need to be a victim. The pain in your stomach is not because you're due on Fiona, it's because you're due a big dump. Once upon a time, trans people represented a tiny percentage of the population, those with a genuine and severe case of gender dysphoria, who would undergo drastic surgeries and medical interventions to change their secondary sex characteristics in order to feel in alignment with the sex they believed they should have been born. In my experience, those people were generally legitimate, sympathetic, and harmless, and they never wanted attention for being trans. Quite the opposite, they just wanted acceptance. They wouldn't come out with this kind of outlandish bullshit to stir up controversy and push boundaries. But the trans identity has become something entirely different. It's been politicized, turned into a trend, fetishized, co-opted, and weaponized against hard-won women's rights. Being trans has become a social contagion for those to whom it's synonymous with political identity, for those lacking in a sense of self, and is nothing more than a label for people with a pathological need to stand out and garner attention, unable to accept their mediocrity. There are a whole load of reasons I believe so many people are choosing to identify as trans all of a sudden, and that's a whole other topic, but I'm certain that for every person truly experiencing intense gender dysphoria, there are many more who have entirely shallow reasons. Now, if Fiona's PMDD post didn't rile me up, this one really pissed me off. It perfectly encapsulates everything I despise about the far left in so few words. We've got the nauseating insincerity, the attention-seeking, narcissism, hypocrisy, lying, the victim mentality, the erasure of actual victims, virtue signalling, and more rote leftist jargon, words rendered meaningless by mindless overuse and misapplication. So the photo is of a meal she's cooked, and the caption says, "I cooked for my housemate and I, absolutely saved the day," of course it did. There's salmon in there somewhere. And then in the comment section, she added, "I think a vegan friend unfriended me for posting this. I used to be vegan, but it wasn't sustainable when my financial situation changed and I developed chronic illnesses. I can't even say it. Don't be an elitist with food. It's classist and ableist." Well, I couldn't not respond, and you can see my comment on the screen, but I'm going to dissect her words further and expose the grotesque mindset behind them. Firstly, I could be wrong, but I would bet no one unfriended her, rather she just made that up for an opportunity to post her follow-up comment. With pathological liars, you end up questioning everything they say. In any event, Fiona has never been vegan. As I mentioned earlier, she bought animal flesh in the most unnecessary of circumstances, and not only that, but she would regularly buy non-vegan alcohol, wear leather, both of which are very easy to avoid, and subsequent to the tuna sandwich, the only time she would ever mention veganism would be to reel off excuses as to why it's too hard to maintain. The fact is, veganism is easy when you focus on the victims and have conviction in your values. But when you're weak, selfish, self-centered, have zero integrity, and see veganism as an edgy trend or bandwagon as opposed to a moral baseline, then yes, it's going to be more difficult than it should be. I've been vegan for 10 years, and beyond the first few months of adjusting and learning, the practicalities are something I very rarely have to consciously consider. It's just second nature. Fiona claimed that she's too hard up to be vegan, which again is bollocks and just another specious cop-out. The cheapest, healthiest, and most accessible foods are plant-based. I mean, look at that plate. The salmon and what I assume is salami will have cost more than everything else on there, all of which appears to be plant-based. As I said in my comment, I'm on the sharp end of this engineered cost of living crisis and barely have enough money to maintain an existence, but being vegan makes no difference to this whatsoever. I can buy vegan toiletries, clothes, food, etc. that are cheaper or at least no more expensive than the non-vegan alternatives. It's really a no-brainer. And then we get to the chronic illness excuse. This one really irks me. Again, I could be wrong, but I have my doubts that Fiona suffers with chronic illnesses. Doubts definitely bolstered by her claim that she has PMDD. So I'm not declaring that she doesn't have chronic illnesses because I don't know, but isn't it a huge coincidence that just like claiming to be trans, claiming to have chronic illnesses, particularly those for which diagnosis relies on honest, good faith self-reporting of symptoms, has become a thing. There is an unmissable correlation between those who are far left and trans, non-binary, genderqueer, etc., who also have chronic illnesses and just love to add them to their collection of labels on their social media bios. It is so totally unfathomable to me that anyone would want to pretend to be ill. Why would they want to be a victim and seek pity? Is it just for attention or validation? I don't know. But just as claiming to be trans for attention, to fit in with one's peers, or for other insincere reasons undermines those who truly suffer with extreme gender dysphoria, and just as trans women claiming to experience the difficulties that are inherent to biological women undermines biological women, feigning chronic illness undermines and is hugely insulting to those who really do live with chronic illness. For the last few years, I've experienced a litany of body-wide and cognitive symptoms, pain, brain fog, and a level of exhaustion I cannot put into words to name but a few. Every diagnostic test I've had has come back normal, and whilst many would like to attribute my symptoms to a plant-based diet, I have no nutritional deficiencies. Based on honest, consistent, and detailed reporting of my symptoms, I've finally been diagnosed with ME/CFS, I believe brought on by prolonged periods of intense, unrelenting stress, and it impacts every aspect of my life. No matter how much sleep I get, I wake up more tired than I was when I went to bed, feeling like I've been hit by a bus, am hungover, and have the flu all at once. I would give anything to have the physical and mental capacity I did before getting ill. I've always prided myself on being physically and mentally strong and capable, and cannot imagine why anyone would fake such a condition. As swathes of people are suddenly claiming to have these often hard-to-prove conditions, those of us really living with them are frequently seen as attention seekers, hypochondriacs, and malingerers. And then there's the cost to the NHS. These such illnesses are generally diagnosed through a process of elimination, years of tests, GP, hospital, and specialist appointments. Though, of course, a lot of these people are self-diagnosed and have merely picked from a list of conditions the one they think is a bit different or they most like the sound of. But whatever the case with Fiona, genuine or not, just as being brassic does not prevent someone from being vegan, nor does having a chronic illness. If I have the ability to cook a meal, then why wouldn't I be able to cook a plant-based one? If I'm capable of buying my own personal effects, why wouldn't I be capable of buying animal-friendly ones? And of course, a large part of being vegan is simply refraining from actions that involve animal exploitation and abuse, e.g. not going to zoos, not riding horses, not going fox hunting. What about having a chronic illness, or being in poverty for that matter, would make someone not able to not do these things? It doesn't make any sense. The meal shown in Fiona's post isn't complicated, but it would have involved quite a few steps and different ingredients, and there are thousands of plant-based meals that would take far less time to cook, use fewer ingredients, and cost a fraction of the price. For example, for my lunch today, I had a very simple one-pot dish. 2 cloves of garlic, and I even used the pureed stuff in a tube for extra convenience, fried in a bit of oil with courgette, a tin of chickpeas, a tin of chopped tomatoes, a stock cube, chili flakes and fresh parsley, served with couscous and a bit of vegan cheese. This recipe uses 1 pot, takes less than 5 minutes to prep, and cooks for about 20 minutes. It's not decadent, but it's tasty and highly nutritious and does me at least 2 meals. You can double or triple the ingredients to batch cook and freeze for easy meals at a later date. So I would ask Fiona, what is it exactly about her financial situation or chronic illnesses that allows her to buy and cook animal-based meals whilst preventing her from being able to buy and cook plant-based meals? Doubling down on her vile, pathetic excuses for violating the rights of innocent and defenceless animals, she manipulatively tried to stave off criticism by calling anyone who would dare challenge her elitist, classist, and ableist. So not only dodging accountability for her inexcusable oppression of others, but using it as an opportunity to virtue signal, drop some leftist lingo, and steal the victim card from those whose mutilated corpses were on her plate. Absolutely disgusting and shameless. There is nothing remotely elitist about veganism. In fact, it's the opposite of elitism. Veganism is simply avoiding the exploitation and abuse of non-human animals as far as is practicable and possible, recognizing that, as sentient beings, they're entitled to have their fundamental rights observed. Deciding that animals are here to serve and be used by us, that it's okay to violate their rights and take their lives for trivial wants, for convenience and sensory pleasure, that is what's elitist. Assuming there are no other animal products used in Fiona's meal, there are 2 animals on that plate that have endured a life of unimaginable pain and misery, and died in terror and agony for Fiona's elitism. The vast majority of salmon sold in the UK are farmed, mostly from Scotland and Ireland. I have a friend who's extensively investigated these farms and, along with other activists, has exposed the barbarity of this industry. The salmon on Fiona's plate would have been kept in extreme confinement, likely with thousands of others in one net pen, causing them immense stress, deformity, and damage to their fins. These sentient beings are often infested with sea lice that eat away at their skin, leaving excruciating sores, and they suffer with viral and bacterial outbreaks which spread rapidly due to the crowded conditions. They're subjected to delousing baths using strong chemicals like hydrogen peroxide, which cause burns, more stress, and even death, and the way salmon are slaughtered matches the brutality of how they're forced to live. Methods include live chilling, where they're dumped en masse into ice water or carbon dioxide baths, and either freeze or suffocate to death. This can take from minutes to even hours. Imagine experiencing such intense pain and fear for that length of time. The pig on Fiona's plate would have suffered an equally hellish existence and death. Pigs are typically kept in unnatural and crowded conditions too, and as intelligent creatures, they become so distressed that the farmers, without anaesthetic, cut off and pull out their testicles, tails, and teeth to stop them from cannibalizing each other out of extreme boredom and frustration. Breeding sows are kept in stark metal farrowing crates in which they can't even turn around for up to 5 weeks, unable to comfort or bond with their babies. And with a high mortality rate for piglets, many will be forced to watch helplessly as their young die next to them. Around 90% of pigs in the UK are killed in CO2 gas chambers, a death that can only be described as torturous. They thrash and writhe in terror and agony as they suffocate and their organs burn from the inside out. And here is Fiona, completely impervious to all of that, deciding she's so much more important than and superior to these beings, so elite, that they should endure this torment for a meal she likely ate in 10 minutes and never thought of again beyond the post in which she so casually displayed photos of their murdered bodies, while somehow painting herself to be the victim in this scenario. It's also crazy that with no trace of irony or satirical intent, she said it would be classist to call her out for this meal. A meal that looks decidedly middle class, if you're inclined to think that way. I don't see many working or underclass single mums or the homeless dining on salmon, cured meats and tender stem broccoli. I mean, how out of touch can you be? She is so obtuse and lacking in self-awareness, but as much as Fiona would like to make everything about class, veganism has nothing to do with class and everything to do with basic moral principles. Lastly, she throws in the leftist classic ableism, basically saying, don't judge me for funding industries that violate every right of other sentient beings and cause pain and suffering I couldn't even begin to conceptualize. I'm disabled. What a load of bollocks. Anthony, who goes by Vegan Hawking on Instagram, lives with ALS and is paralysed. He's also a vegan and a brilliant, compassionate animal rights advocate. So what the fuck is your excuse, Fiona? Oppressing, discriminating against, subjugating and killing non-human animals because you deem them inferior to you based on morally arbitrary trait differences, because you consider them less able, sounds way more ableist than telling you that if you can prepare a meal with animal products, you can prepare a meal without animal products. Really, Fiona and those like her should just admit that they are selfish, shallow and self-absorbed and only care about rights violations when they're either happening to them or when challenging them doesn't require any change on their part. I haven't given any identifying details about Fiona because I don't want to encourage dogpiling, not least because she would absolutely bask in the attention and another opportunity to play the victim. And really, she is just one carbon copy of pretty much every far left person I've ever encountered, and is merely one I've used to warn of and exemplify the deeply concerning increase in the traits and qualities I've highlighted throughout this video. I also want to add that whilst I generally find those on the far right slightly less obsessive, vitriolic and pervasive, they still possess many of the traits and qualities of the far left, only they manifest through different attitudes and behaviours, many of which I abhor in equal measure. For example, whilst factions of the far left parrot that veganism is classist, ableist, elitist, only for the white and privileged, etc., many of those on the right have unquestioningly adopted the equally baseless rhetoric that veganism is for soy boys, meaning it's somehow emasculating for men to defend the vulnerable, walk their own path, and drink milk made for humans as opposed to that made for baby bovine mammals. Many have been brainwashed into thinking that killing or paying someone else to kill docile animals is manly, that vegans don't get enough protein, and that all of us are people like Fiona. Time and time again, I've heard them mindlessly repeat that it's a personal choice to eat, wear, or otherwise use animals, when a choice that violates every right of another is so obviously not a personal one. The colour of t-shirt you wear is a personal choice. Cutting someone else's throat is not. The far right also likes to paint vegans as over-emotional snowflakes, whilst appealing to the sentimental, emotional arguments of tradition and culture as excuses to continue exploiting animals. They will not only mock vegans, but the suffering of animals too, leaving inane, trite comments about bacon on posts showing the horrors animals are subjected to by the industries that profit from them, without realising it makes them just as repelling, moronic and indoctrinated as the leftists they despise. This all goes to show that veganism is not political and that ultimately the far left and far right are mirror images of one another, each trapped in their echo chambers, incapable of genuine introspection, and too wrapped up in identity to confront reality with openness, honesty and integrity. Our values should not be constrained by or reduced to a political label. They're reflected in the way that we live our lives and the sum of the choices we make.